There are films that we look back upon and see the genesis of something special within pop culture. 1968's Night of the Living Dead is one of those films, and it is consistently on top 100 lists of American films for its success, its production, and its impact, one that is still felt to this day. Don't believe me? Then let me know what other horror subject matter dominated the mid-2000s more than the zombie apocalypse. You can't, and it is all owed to this film. Directed by the legendary horror icon George Romero. In fact, this was his first major film offering. Night of the Living Dead has been viewed, interpreted, and dissected thousands of times over for not only its place in cinema history, but also for its perceived social commentary. Now, for those of you who don't know, 1968 is one of the most tumultuous years in the history of the United States. Political assassinations, race riots, cultural divisions, activist protests against a costly invasion of Vietnam, the very fabric of America was being ripped apart in the streets. Many who view Night of the Living Dead through the lens of history see the movie as an allegorical representation of that violent and contentious time. But did it mean to do that? Did George Romero start out to make a film that was a commentary of what everyday Americans were experiencing on a daily basis? Well, we'll answer that question, but first, let's get into the plot of the film itself. And just so you know, the word zombie is never used in this film. However, I will be using that word during this review because it's just easier. But before we get to it, if you could take a moment to like, subscribe, comment, and share this video out, we really appreciate it. It helps out the channel each and every week. We begin in the outskirts of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Barbara and her brother Johnny are driving hours out of their way to place a cross on their father's grave. Johnny is frustrated with having to spend his entire Sunday going 3 hours to spend just 5 minutes at the final resting place of a man who he can hardly remember how he looks. As they park, Johnny listens to the radio come back to life, and although it seems that there is going to be some important news to listen to, he turns it off. He's in too much of a hurry. Barbara is more reserved and kneels and prays as Johnny recalls a time when he scared his sister at this very same cemetery, which is where we get the now often memed,
"They're coming to get you, Barbara."
As they begin to leave, a man in the background stumbles along through the headstones. Johnny points him out, and as they pass him by, it is obvious that there is something off about him. He attacks Barbara and Johnny. Johnny struggles with what seems like an enraged and feral man in a suit. He's thrown down and hits his head on the gravestone. He ceases to move. The strange, stumbling man turns towards Barbara and chases her. We, as audience members, know that this is an undead man. This is a zombie. Barbara flees towards their parked car. As she gets in, she realizes that she does not have the keys. Johnny does. She locks the doors as the zombie approaches. He slaps and claws at the windows, desperately trying to get inside. He then shows a sense of intelligence as he picks up a large rock and smashes the passenger side window. Barbara releases the emergency brake and the car begins to roll downhill, giving her a chance to escape. Unable to control the vehicle while in such a panicked state, she crashes against a tree. In reality, this was not in the script. The car belonged to the mother of one of the producers, and during filming, the car was hit by another vehicle, and the dent could not be fixed, so they just wrote it into the movie. Barbara begins to run through the woods, down a country road, into a field, and finally to an isolated farmhouse, her brother's killer still in pursuit. She finds her way inside. There appears to be no one home. She tries the phone. It's disconnected. Terrified, she picks up a butcher's knife from the kitchen and looks around. As she peers outside the window, she sees the undead man outside, and soon he's joined by other zombies as they meander around the house, waiting for her to exit. Barbara goes up the stairs looking for a place to hide, but comes across a rotting corpse. She panics again and rushes out the front door where she's blinded by lights, headlights to be exact. A black man, wielding a crowbar, exits a truck, grabs her, and brings her back inside the farmhouse to safety. We later learn that his name is Ben. He peppers Barbara with questions, to which Barbara does not answer. She's in shock. He asks her about the gas pump by the barn, but it's locked. Does she know where the key is? Does she even live there? Barbara only stares at him with blank eyes. Ben finds the body upstairs and decides then and there they need to leave. He goes to gather as much food and supplies as he can, and this is when Barbara finally speaks and asks, "What's going on?" But before Ben can answer, they are disrupted by the sound of smashing glass. Apparently the zombies don't like light because they are breaking the truck's headlamps, which were left on. Afraid that they will destroy the entire truck, their only means of escape, Ben attacks 2 of the zombies, as there are now about 6 of them gathered. He manages to smash their skulls, putting them down for good. Meanwhile, Barbara is sitting almost catatonic in a chair when another zombie makes his way inside and attacks her. Ben makes his way back to her and kills her attacker, then he drags the body outside and lights it on fire. And this is when he realizes that these creatures are afraid of fire. They spend the next few minutes fortifying the house, boarding up windows, barricading doors. Barbara tries to help, but her trauma is still dominating her. But she is trying, and Ben seems completely in control of the situation. Ben and Barbara trade their stories with each other, how they got to where they are now. It is here when Barbara becomes unhinged. She demands that they go back to the cemetery and rescue Johnny. Ben tries to reason with her. He tells her that Johnny is dead, but Barbara will not accept that and tries to exit the house. Ben stands in her way. Barbara slaps him, so Ben knocks her out and places her on the couch. As she is unconscious, Ben finds that the radio still works. He listens to news reports about the phenomenon of seemingly ordinary citizens committing murder all over the country, that it is an epidemic with no answers. And as he listens, he douses a chair with lighter fluid. He then pushes it outside the front door and lights that on fire in an effort to keep the zombie horde from trying to enter. In the meantime, Barbara wakes back up. Ben continues to prep for survival and finds a rifle in the closet. He also finds a pair of shoes for Barbara, who is barefoot, because despite his conflict with her, Ben cares about helping her as much as possible. Now he's exhausted. He needs sleep, and he heads upstairs. Barbara stays on the couch listening to the radio continue to give us exposition on the whats and whys of all this zombie activity, why it's occurring, including telling listeners that the zombies are practicing cannibalism. As Ben sleeps, the basement door begins to open up. A hand creeps through the opening. Barbara begins to scream as two men exit the basement, one of them restraining Barbara. As Ben comes racing down the stairs, he's confronted by Harry Cooper, an older gentleman, and Tom, a man seemingly in his 20s. Ben asks them if they've been in the basement all this time, which they confirm. And then Ben asks why didn't they come up to help, to which Mr. Cooper first lies about not hearing anything. Then he tells them they heard something, but he wasn't going to risk their lives after all, and Ben catches him in this lie. And it's plain for the audience and for everyone else to see, Mr. Cooper is a Class A jerk. However, Tom tries to be the reasonable one between Ben and Cooper, but it doesn't work out very well. Ben and Mr. Cooper argue about what to do. Go in the basement, stay upstairs, board the windows, board the doors. There seems to be no consensus between the two on how to handle the situation. Thus begins the great cinematic debate. The Ben plan versus the Cooper plan. What would you do? Like Ben, would you stay upstairs where there's line of sight but ample risk for zombies to enter and attack? Or, like Mr. Cooper, would you hunker down in the basement with no windows or outside communications but just one access point to defend? Let me know in the comment section which one you would go with. Meanwhile, the zombies have multiplied to well over a dozen, and a few try to breach the kitchen window. Ben and Tom defend the weak point with the butcher's knife and the rifle, and Ben discovers what we already know: only a headshot will do. And in case you're wondering, the blood you see throughout this scene and others is delicious. It's actually Bosco's chocolate sauce. We are then joined by Judy, Tom's girlfriend, and Helen Cooper, Harry's wife, along with their daughter Karen, who's sick because she was attacked before making it to the basement. We then get more arguments. Helen and Harry argue about staying in the basement as well, and it is evident that the two are not happily married. Helen wants to be upstairs, where there's a working radio and television, so they can keep informed as to what's going on. We then view a live news report, partly from Washington, D.C., with military personnel and advisors speculating about the cause of the crisis. The prevailing theory is that a NASA satellite returned from the area of Neptune, infused with alien radiation. Even though the satellite was destroyed in orbit, the radiation may still have rained down on Earth, therefore becoming the reason for the zombie attacks. We get more arguments between Tom, Ben, and Harry over what to do. Ben wants to get to the gas pump by the barn and fill up the truck. Tom agrees to help, and Cooper agrees to throw Molotov cocktails onto the zombies to buy some time for them to get it done. Tom believes he has the all-important key to the pump from down in the basement. They put their hastily concocted plan into action, except the wild card is that Judy refuses to stay inside without Tom and runs out to the truck as well. Cooper remains a man of his word and does what he said he would do, and drops firebomb after firebomb onto the zombie horde. Ben, Tom, and Judy make it to the pump, but the key is not the right one. So Ben shoots the lock, but now the gasoline is streaming out of the spout. Ben's torch ignites the gas accidentally, including the residue that made its way onto the back of the truck. And as Ben tries to put out the ground fire, Judy and Tom move the vehicle, but it's too late. The truck explodes and takes both of them with it. Ben is now stranded. Using his shotgun and his still lit torch, he fights his way through the now 30 or more zombies looking to feast on his flesh. However, Ben's problems are not over when he reaches the house. Cooper is not opening the door for him, either out of fear or spite or a combination of both. Ben bursts through, rebarricades the door, and then punches Cooper in the face. The zombies then turn their attention on the remains of Tom and Judy still in the truck. still on fire. They tear their bodies apart and begin to consume them. And yes, those are real animal organs and bones that the actors are munching on, with a generous helping of Bosco's chocolate sauce, that is. Most of the crew and a lot of the actors were nauseated at the act, but that's dedication to the craft, if you ask me. As the survivors process what just happened, we learn from further news reports that the local sheriff has formed a large group of officers and unaffected citizens to go door to door, field by field, hunting and burning any and all zombies they come across. Back in the farmhouse, the lights go out. Ben goes to check on the fuse box in the cellar, and this is when Cooper explains to his wife that he needs to get that rifle away from Ben so he can take control of the situation. Helen scoffs at him like a wife who's had enough abuse. Ben returns from the basement and one of the zombies picks up a rock, another picks up an extinguished torch, and they all converge on the house, pounding on every door and window, and they begin to break through. Ben does his best to secure one window when he asks for Cooper's help, but Cooper doesn't move. That is until Ben drops the rifle, so he could use both hands to keep the zombies out. Cooper sees his chance and grabs the rifle. He orders Helen into the cellar, but Ben throws a wooden plank at him and then rushes Cooper. They begin to struggle over the rifle, but Ben wins out and shoots Cooper in the stomach. As the zombies continue to break through the barriers, Cooper stumbles down into the cellar where his daughter is still lying ill. Helen is being grabbed and clawed at by numerous zombie hands through the front door, and this is where Barbara snaps into survival mode, rushing to help Helen. After getting free, Helen rushes into the basement, only to find that her daughter has died and risen to become one of the monsters herself. She is feasting on her father's corpse. In shock and disbelief, she allows Karen to approach her. Helen is knocked to the ground, and Karen uses a trowel to repeatedly stab her own mother to death. Upstairs, the fight is useless. The zombies, including our original zombie from the graveyard, are almost through the door. Barbara then sees her brother Johnny, now a zombie himself. Johnny drags his own sister outside and the horde begins to feast. Overwhelmed and surrounded, Ben runs to the cellar, closes the door and barricades it. Miraculously, the door holds. Ben then finds Mr. and Mrs. Cooper dead in the basement, but Mr. Cooper is still a threat. He is now a zombie and begins to rise. Ben puts 3 shots into him and then, as Mrs. Cooper awakens, he fires upon her too. Exhausted and out of hope, Ben waits for the final fight, one that never comes. The zombies seem to lose interest and wander off. Night turns to day. The sheriff's hunting party is out and making their way towards the farmhouse. They see multiple zombies. They shoot them and drag them off to be burned in the fields. As they approach the house, the noise of the gunshots and the helicopters get Ben's attention. He leaves the basement and makes his way to the window. Members of the sheriff's group spot Ben and mistake him for one of the undead. The sheriff orders them to fire, and Ben is killed. The closing credits are still shots of the hunting party dragging Ben's body off on meat hooks to be thrown on the pile and incinerated. Thus ends Night of the Living Dead, and thus begins the popularity of zombies in 20th and 21st century American pop culture. As well, thus begins the conversation about this film. Is it meant to be a commentary on race? A lone black man causing black panic by being depicted in a house with a white woman, not being immediately subservient to the commands of a white man, the only one with a weapon, the one who destroys the quaint farmhouse in the country for his own benefit, the one who is misunderstood because he is the only one thinking about others, and the one who is executed by a group of white country folk without due process. In 1968, race relations were volatile. There is no disputing that. But did it have anything to do with this film? The answer is no, not in the least. The part of Ben was written as a white man. Dwayne Jones impressed the production team so much that he was given the part, and no thought of race was ever considered while making the picture, except to say that they knew this would be the first time a black man was the lead in a major horror film. The now deceased Mr. Jones would later in life express pride and gratitude for being cast in the role, and appreciated the interpretation of the film along the lines of racial commentary. But never did he or George Romero ever express that this was the intent, nor has it been confirmed that the idea that immigrants were to blame for diluting the American nuclear family, or the American idealism that was so prevalent in the 1950s. After all, the zombies were caused by an inferred alien virus. Again, a great theoretical interpretation about immigration in America, but it's just that, theoretical. Sometimes art imitates life, and life imitates art. And not always is it on purpose or intentional. I think it's safe to say that some of the everyday social conversation made its way into the script because you write what you know, even subconsciously. That I can buy. But the film was never intending to be a major social commentary, and maybe that's the sign of great art. A great story, not worrying about the social message, but just worrying about trying to portray characters that are real and have real situations and real problems to overcome. Either way, Whether you look at Night of the Living Dead as the product of activism from a young, fresh, talented writer-director trying to make a statement with his first film, or you see it as a simple, entertaining horror film about zombies, one thing is for sure. Night of the Living Dead was, and still is, one of the most influential films, horror or otherwise, to be released in the past 100 years. And that's what I think. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you think this film has a social message, or do you see it as just the audience inserting themselves into the art? Next week, we're going to take a look at a film based upon my favorite Stephen King novel, 1993's Needful Things, otherwise known as The Last Castle Rock Story. I hope you'll join us for that. In the meantime, if you need more retro movie fun, click on the thumbnails for my playlist and let me know if there's a movie you're looking forward to seeing in an upcoming episode of Retro Movie Review Theater. I thank you for watching, and remember, I'm still your reluctant gringo from somewhere south of the border. Salud and a huevo.